"Daddy, she doesn't want us." The little girl's whisper was so quiet that only Ethan heard it. He looked down at Lily, who stood beside him in her tiny white dress, clutching his hand with all the strength a 7-year-old could manage. Her bright blue eyes were fixed on the woman waiting at the end of the aisle. Vivian Ashford. America's youngest billionaire CEO. She wasn't looking at them. She was staring at the marriage contract in front of her as though it were a prison sentence. The wedding guests mistook her silence for confidence. Lily didn't. "Can we go home?" she whispered. "Before she says no." Ethan's heart tightened. He knelt and brushed a loose curl away from his daughter's face. "No matter what happens today," he said softly, "you and I are still a team. But teams don't leave each other. We never will." She searched his face. "You promise?" "I promise." The officiant cleared his throat. "Mr. Carter. Miss Ashford. It is time." Every camera in the ballroom turned toward them. The marriage wasn't a celebration. It was business news. For 3 days, every television station had asked the same question: why would the woman who had rejected senators, celebrities, heirs, and billionaire CEOs agree to marry a widowed garage owner raising a little girl in Brooklyn? No one knew. Not even Ethan. He had almost refused. Until an elderly lawyer delivered a handwritten letter from William Ashford, the founder of Ashford Global. The final line had stayed with him every night since. "Please help my granddaughter discover that success means nothing if she has no one waiting for her at home." It hadn't sounded like a business deal. It had sounded like the last wish of a grandfather running out of time. Vivian finally looked up. For the first time, their eyes met. She expected ambition. Instead she found kindness. That unsettled her more than arrogance ever could. She had spent 15 years learning how to defeat people who wanted something from her. She had never learned what to do with someone who expected nothing. The officiant smiled politely. "Do you both enter this marriage willingly?" The room became painfully quiet. Vivian almost laughed. Willingly. Half the board of directors had threatened to remove her if she ignored the clause hidden inside her grandfather's will. She wasn't standing here because she believed in love. She was standing here because she refused to lose the company she had spent her entire adult life building. Ethan answered first. "I do." His voice was calm. Certain. Not because he wanted the arrangement. Because he had made peace with it. Vivian looked at him. "You don't even know me." "No." "Then why are you so calm?" He smiled gently. "Because worrying has never changed tomorrow." She blinked. Nobody had ever answered one of her sharp questions like that. The officiant turned toward her. "And you, Miss Ashford?" Every eye in the room watched. Every camera waited. Vivian slowly inhaled. "I." Before she could finish, Lily suddenly slipped free from Ethan's hand and hurried toward her. Gasps filled the ballroom. Security instinctively stepped forward. The little girl stopped directly in front of Vivian. She reached into the pocket of her tiny dress and held out a folded piece of paper. "I made this." Vivian hesitated before accepting it. She unfolded the paper. It was a child's drawing. 3 people stood holding hands beneath a bright yellow sun. One was clearly Ethan. One was Lily. The third woman had long blonde hair. Above the drawing, written in uneven handwriting, were the words, "Maybe someday you'll smile with us." Vivian stared at the picture. She couldn't remember the last time someone had given her something without expecting anything back. Her assistant scheduled gifts. Business partners exchanged gifts. Investors gave gifts. Everything had a purpose. Everything came with invisible strings. This drawing didn't. Lily looked up nervously. "You don't have to keep it." Vivian swallowed. "I'm going to." The little girl's face lit up. She ran back to Ethan. "You see. She whispered loudly. She smiled. Ethan glanced toward Vivian. She quickly looked away before he noticed. Too late. He already had. The ceremony continued. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, polite applause filled the ballroom. Reporters rushed outside to broadcast the story. The billionaire CEO had married a mechanic. The headlines practically wrote themselves. Vivian expected Ethan to ask for photographs. An interview. A statement. Instead, he crouched beside Lily. Ready to go home? She nodded enthusiastically. Then he looked at Vivian. Our driver can take you to the penthouse. She frowned. Our? I assumed you'd be more comfortable there. And you? Lily and I will go back to Brooklyn. Vivian stared at him. You aren't moving in. He looked genuinely confused. You barely know us. Exactly. I thought you might want some space. For the second time that day, she had no response. Every man she'd ever dated had wanted access to her world. Her homes. Her wealth. Her influence. This man was politely trying to avoid all of it. As Ethan picked up Lily's backpack, Vivian spoke without thinking. Wait. He turned. If we're doing this. She glanced at Lily. Then pretending we're strangers isn't going to work. Ethan remained silent. Vivian surprised herself again. Come home with me. Lily's eyes became huge. She looked at Ethan. Then back at Vivian. In the sweetest voice imaginable, she asked, Does that mean, we can all eat dinner together? Vivian had negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions without hesitation. Yet somehow, one little girl's hopeful question felt far more intimidating. The hope in Lily's eyes caught Vivian completely off guard. For a moment, the ballroom disappeared. There were no reporters waiting outside. No board members whispering. No lawyers watching every move she made. There was only a little girl waiting to hear whether she belonged somewhere. Vivian slowly nodded. Yes. Lily let out a tiny squeal and threw her arms around Ethan's waist. We're having our first family dinner. Several guests smiled despite themselves. Others exchanged confused glances. Vivian wasn't known for warmth. In the business world, she had earned a nickname that appeared in magazine headlines more than once. The Ice Queen of Wall Street. Watching her agree to dinner with her new husband and his daughter was the last thing anyone expected. As they walked toward the exit, camera flashes exploded from every direction. Mrs. Ashford. Did you marry for love or business? Mr. Carter, are you quitting your garage? When's the honeymoon? Vivian instinctively reached for Ethan's arm, pretending they were a united couple. Instead of stiffening, he gently covered her hand with his. Keep looking forward, he whispered. They're hoping you'll react. His voice was so calm that her racing heartbeat began to slow. For years, she had faced reporters alone. She had never realized how comforting it felt to have someone quietly standing beside her instead of behind her. The ride to her penthouse overlooking Central Park was almost silent. Lily sat between them, staring out the window with childlike wonder. I've never been this high before. Vivian smiled faintly. You'll like the view at night. Can we see the stars? If the city lights let us. Lily giggled. I think stars are stronger. Ethan looked at his daughter with quiet pride. She always believes impossible things. Vivian looked out the window. I used to. Neither of them spoke again. The sadness in her voice said enough. The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows surrounded the living room. Modern furniture sat untouched. Fresh flowers decorated tables no one gathered around. It looked perfect. Lily stepped inside carefully. Is this really your house? Vivian nodded. It doesn't smell like a house. Ethan immediately looked embarrassed. Lily. What? She whispered loudly, it smells like a hotel. Vivian laughed. The sound surprised all three of them. I suppose you're right. Lily smiled. Our apartment smells like pancakes. And motor oil, Ethan added. And Daddy's cinnamon coffee. Vivian looked around her spotless home. She couldn't remember what it smelled like. She had cleaners. Designers. House managers. But no memories attached to any of it. Lily wandered toward the enormous bookshelf. So many books. She pulled one out. Alice in Wonderland. You've read it? Vivian asked. Daddy reads one chapter every night. Ethan shrugged. It's our thing. Vivian suddenly realized something. No one had ever read to her as a child. Her grandfather had loved her deeply, but he had raised her to become a leader. Bedtime stories had been replaced with newspaper articles and business biographies. Success had come early. Childhood hadn't. An hour later, Ethan stood awkwardly in the sleek kitchen. I should probably order dinner. Vivian frowned. You cook. When Lily lets me. I help, Lily announced proudly. Vivian opened her refrigerator. Sparkling water. Fruit. Expensive cheese. Prepared meals. Nothing that resembled a family dinner. I don't actually have ingredients. Ethan smiled politely. I noticed. She folded her arms. Don't judge me. I'm not. You are. I'm observing. Same thing. He laughed softly. No. It's really not. She realized he wasn't teasing her. He simply wasn't intimidated by her. It was strangely refreshing. I saw a grocery store 2 blocks away, he said. I can pick up a few things. Vivian reached for her purse. I'll come. You don't have to. I know. I want to. The moment they entered the neighborhood grocery store, several shoppers recognized Vivian. Whispers followed them through every aisle. That's her. The billionaire. Who's the man? Is that her husband? Vivian instinctively lowered her head. She hated shopping in public. Ethan quietly took the shopping basket from her hands. What are you doing? Making your life easier. You don't even know what I eat. I know what Lily eats. He looked down. What sounds good tonight? Pasta. And garlic bread. And chocolate milk. Vivian raised an eyebrow. Quite the balanced menu. Lily grinned. We'll eat vegetables tomorrow. Even Vivian couldn't argue with that logic. As Ethan compared prices on pasta, Vivian stared. You check the prices? Always. You can buy whatever you want now. He looked at her. With your money? Our money. He gently shook his head. No. The answer came so naturally that she almost missed it. I've taken care of Lily on my own for 6 years. I don't intend to stop. Vivian didn't know why those words affected her. Maybe because every person she'd ever dated had quietly expected her to pay. Or perhaps because Ethan's pride wasn't about ego. It was about dignity. She respected that. On the drive home, Lily fell asleep in the back seat, hugging the grocery bag containing marshmallows Ethan had secretly bought her. Vivian noticed. You said no sweets. I did. And then? He smiled. She remembered to say, please. Vivian shook her head. You're impossible. So I've been told. She looked at him for a long moment. Can I ask you something? You just did. I mean a real question. He nodded. Go ahead. Why did you agree to marry me? He kept his eyes on the road. Because your grandfather asked me. That's not enough. It was for me. You didn't think about the money? No. The publicity? No. The opportunities? He smiled. I already had everything that mattered. He glanced in the rearview mirror at Lily sleeping peacefully. She was sitting in my back seat. Vivian looked at the little girl. Then back at Ethan. For the first time in years, she envied someone. Not for their wealth. Not for their success. For the simple certainty of knowing what mattered most. As they pulled into the underground garage beneath the penthouse, Vivian's phone rang. Her assistant. Miss Ashford, there's a situation. Vivian's expression changed instantly. What happened? The board moved tomorrow's meeting to tonight. Why? They're demanding an emergency vote. On what? There was a brief pause. Then her assistant answered quietly. Whether you're still fit to remain CEO, now that you've married a mechanic. Vivian closed her eyes. She had expected resistance. She hadn't expected it this quickly. Ethan watched her face carefully. When she ended the call, he didn't ask what had happened. He simply said, "Tell me what you need." She looked at him, surprised. He wasn't asking because he wanted to fix her company. He was asking because he wanted to help her. And somehow, that made all the difference. Vivian slipped her phone into her purse and leaned against the car for a moment. She had negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions without losing her composure. She had shut down hostile takeovers before breakfast. But one phone call had made her shoulders feel heavier than they had in years. Ethan noticed. You don't have to tell me. She looked at him. If you don't want to. Something about the way he said it made it easier to speak. The board wants to vote me out. Lily had just woken up. Her sleepy eyes grew wide. They're firing you? Vivian forced a smile. They're going to try. Lily frowned. That's not fair. Vivian laughed softly. No. It isn't. Lily looked at Ethan. Daddy? Yes. If someone works really hard, people shouldn't take their job away. He nodded. They shouldn't. Vivian watched the exchange without saying a word. She had spent years surrounded by executives who spoke in percentages and projections. Yet somehow, a sleepy 7-year-old had summarized the situation more honestly than any board member ever could. They carried the groceries upstairs. Lily insisted on helping, even though the grocery bag she chose only held a loaf of bread. As soon as they entered the penthouse, Lily ran toward the kitchen. I'm making the table. Vivian looked at Ethan. You don't have to stay. We're having dinner. I have a board meeting. Then we'll eat quickly. You don't understand. He waited. If I lose this vote. She looked around the enormous penthouse. I lose everything. Ethan quietly placed the grocery bags on the counter. Then he looked directly at her. No. She frowned. What do you mean, no? You don't lose everything. I lose the company. Yes. I lose my position. Maybe. I lose my reputation. For a while. She folded her arms. So what exactly do I have left? He smiled. You still have dinner getting cold. She stared at him. He wasn't joking. You really believe food fixes everything? No. But facing bad news on an empty stomach usually makes it worse. For a second, Vivian forgot she was talking to her husband. She felt like she was talking to someone who had already survived storms much bigger than hers. 30 minutes later, the dining table looked nothing like the elegant dinners Vivian usually hosted. There were bowls of pasta. Garlic bread. A crooked salad Lily had proudly made herself. Chocolate milk beside crystal glasses. It should have looked ridiculous. Instead, it looked warm. Lily climbed into her chair. Everybody has to say one good thing about today. Vivian blinked. What? It's our dinner rule. She looked at Ethan. You have dinner rules. We have lots of them. Lily pointed toward Ethan. Daddy first. He thought for a moment. My favorite part of today. He smiled at Vivian. Was watching someone laugh. Vivian looked down. No one had ever answered a question like that. Lily clapped. My turn, she beamed. My favorite part was getting a new mommy. The room became very quiet. Lily immediately realized what she'd said. She looked at Vivian nervously. I'm sorry. I know you're not really my mommy yet. I just. Her voice became smaller. I wanted to know what it felt like to say it. Vivian felt her chest tighten. She had spent years giving presentations to thousands of people. Nothing had ever left her speechless quite like one little girl. She reached across the table and gently squeezed Lily's hand. You don't have to say you're sorry. Lily searched her face. I don't know. The little girl smiled so brightly that Ethan had to look away for a second. He didn't want either of them seeing the tears threatening to appear. An hour later, Vivian stood in front of the mirror adjusting her navy business suit. The warmth of dinner already felt far away. The boardroom would be different. Cold. Calculated. Unforgiving. She picked up her briefcase. Then paused. Someone knocked gently on the bedroom door. Come in. Ethan stepped inside. He was still wearing jeans and a simple blue shirt. I found something. What? He held up a tiny piece of dried pasta. It was stuck in your hair. For the first time that evening, she laughed again. He carefully brushed it away. There. She looked at him through the mirror. Thank you. He nodded toward the briefcase. Ready? As I'll ever be. No. She turned. What? You look like you're getting ready for a fight. It is a fight. He shook his head. Then you've already lost. Vivian frowned. I don't understand. You built that company. Yes. You know you're qualified. Yes. So stop trying to prove you're worthy. He smiled gently. Walk in there like you're reminding them. Those words settled somewhere deep inside her. Not because they were dramatic. Because they were exactly what she needed to hear. The Ashford Global boardroom overlooked the Manhattan skyline. 12 board members sat around the polished table. News of Vivian's marriage had already spread across every major business network. Gregory Ashford smiled as she entered. Right on time, he glanced toward Ethan. I see you brought him. Vivian calmly took her seat. I brought my husband. The emphasis wasn't lost on anyone. Gregory leaned back. I hope he's enjoying the view. He is. Gregory smirked. It'll be the last time. The chairman cleared his throat. This emergency meeting has been called because shareholders have expressed concern regarding the public image of Ashford Global. Vivian didn't blink. The chairman continued. Specifically. Your decision to marry someone outside the business community. One director spoke first. Our stock dropped 3% today. Another nodded. Investors are questioning your judgment. A third added, they're asking whether your personal decisions reflect your business decisions. Gregory folded his hands. Perhaps our CEO has become emotional. Vivian remained perfectly still. Every instinct told her to defend herself. To argue. To fight. Then she remembered Ethan's words. Stop trying to prove you're worthy. She slowly stood. I have a question. The room quieted. Before I answer yours. She looked around the table. How many of you have met my husband? No one raised a hand. How many of you have spoken to him? Silence. How many of you know anything about him besides today's headlines? Again, no one answered. Vivian smiled. Interesting. She rested both hands on the table. So you've concluded that marrying a mechanic makes me unfit to lead. Without taking 5 minutes to learn who he is. Several directors looked uncomfortable. Gregory wasn't one of them. He simply smiled. This isn't personal. Vivian looked directly at him. No. It never is. Then, to everyone's surprise, Ethan quietly stood from the visitor's chair at the back of the room. He hadn't planned to speak. But he could see one thing clearly. Vivian had spent years fighting for herself. Tonight, someone needed to fight for her. May I say something? He asked. The room fell silent. Every head in the boardroom turned toward Ethan. Gregory's smile widened. He was certain this would end badly. A mechanic speaking in front of Wall Street's most influential executives. This could only embarrass Vivian. The chairman adjusted his glasses. This meeting is for board members only. Ethan nodded politely. I understand. He started to sit back down. However, Vivian interrupted, as my husband, he has every right to respond to comments made about him. The chairman hesitated. Several directors exchanged glances. Finally, he nodded. You have 2 minutes. Ethan smiled. I won't need that long. He stepped forward. There wasn't a trace of nervousness in his voice. Not because he was used to boardrooms. Because he wasn't trying to impress anyone. He looked around the table. I've never wanted this seat. He gestured toward Vivian. I've never wanted her company. I've never wanted her money. A few directors shifted in their chairs. I own a small auto repair shop. I wake up at 6 every morning. I work with my hands. I pay my taxes. I coach my daughter's soccer team on Saturdays. He paused. And until last week. I had never been inside a skyscraper this tall. A few people smiled despite themselves. Gregory rolled his eyes. Ethan continued. I've heard the word mechanic used a lot tonight. As if it's something embarrassing. His voice remained calm, so I'd like to ask one question. He looked directly at the directors. When your car breaks down on the highway, which do you call? The CEO? Or the mechanic? A quiet chuckle spread across the room. Even the chairman couldn't hide a smile. Ethan wasn't finished. Every profession matters. The people who build companies matter. So do the people who build schools. The people who teach children. The people who fix engines. The people who collect trash. The people who keep hospitals running. He looked toward Vivian. You hired thousands of people because you believed their work had value. Then he looked back at the board. So why does my work suddenly lose value because I married your CEO? The room fell completely silent. No one had an answer. Not because his argument was complicated. Because it was true. Ethan nodded respectfully. Thank you for letting me speak. He turned and quietly returned to his seat. Vivian couldn't stop looking at him. He hadn't defended himself. He had defended everyone who had ever been looked down on because of their job. And somehow, he had also defended her. The chairman cleared his throat. Very well. We'll proceed with the vote. Gregory smiled confidently. He had already secured enough support. Or so he believed. Director Helen Brooks slowly raised her hand. Before we vote, I'd like to say something. Gregory frowned. She looked toward Vivian. I've served this company for 22 years. I've watched Ms. Ashford increase our revenue every single year. She turned toward Gregory. And today? The only criticism I've heard is that she married someone decent. Several directors looked at one another. Another director spoke. I agree. So do I, said another. Gregory's smile began to fade. The chairman looked around the room. Very well. All those in favor of removing Vivian Ashford as CEO. Only 3 hands went up. Gregory's. And 2 directors he had personally recruited. The chairman looked around again. Those opposed. 9 hands rose immediately. The motion fails. Applause broke out around the table. Gregory remained frozen in his chair. He had never expected the board to unite behind Vivian. Not after the media storm. Not after the marriage. Vivian looked at Ethan. He didn't celebrate. He simply smiled as if he'd known all along. The following morning, headlines covered every major news website. Mechanic speech saves billionaire CEO. Board backs Vivian Ashford. The husband who stole America's heart. The video of Ethan's speech spread across social media. Millions watched it. Teachers shared it. Construction workers shared it. Nurses shared it. Parents shared it. The comments all repeated the same sentence. That's the kind of man every child deserves as a father. When Ethan arrived at his garage later that morning, he stopped in surprise. The sidewalk was packed. Customers waited outside. Not because they needed repairs. Because they wanted to meet him. One elderly man stepped forward. "I saw your speech." He held out his hand. "Thank you." Ethan looked confused. "For what?" "For reminding my grandson that honest work is something to be proud of." Another customer smiled. "My daughter wants to become a mechanic. After hearing you, I'm going to encourage her." Ethan looked overwhelmed. He had only spoken for 2 minutes. He never imagined those words would matter to strangers. Meanwhile, Vivian sat alone in her office. For years, she'd celebrated victories with champagne and press conferences. Today, none of that interested her. Instead, she opened the folded drawing Lily had given her at the wedding. "Maybe someday you'll smile with us." Vivian traced the uneven handwriting with her fingertips. Then she looked through the glass wall of her office. Hundreds of employees hurried through the building. She suddenly realized something. She knew quarterly profits. She knew shareholder reports. She knew every division's revenue. But she didn't know the names of the people who cleaned the offices every night. She didn't know the receptionist's children. She didn't know who was struggling. Or who was celebrating. She had built a successful company. But had she built a community? That question stayed with her for the rest of the day. Late that afternoon, she made a decision that shocked her executive team. She canceled 3 investor dinners. Rescheduled 2 television interviews. Then called Ethan. He answered on the second ring. "Everything okay?" "Yes." "You sound different." "I am." She smiled. "I want to come home early." There was a brief silence. Then Ethan laughed softly. "Home. You called it home." Vivian hadn't even realized she'd said it. For the first time in years, the penthouse no longer felt like an expensive apartment. Because someone was waiting for her there. Someone who didn't care whether Ashford Global's stock had risen or fallen that day. Someone who only cared whether she'd be home in time for dinner. And without realizing it, that had already become the richest part of her life. Vivian smiled all the way home. It was a strange feeling. Normally, after winning a board vote, she'd spend the drive answering calls from investors, reviewing contracts, or planning the next acquisition. Tonight, she turned her phone over and ignored every notification. For the first time in years, work could wait. Family couldn't. When the elevator doors opened to the penthouse, the unmistakable smell of fresh bread drifted into the hallway. Laughter followed. Real laughter. Vivian stepped inside quietly. Lily was standing on a chair in the kitchen wearing an oversized apron that nearly touched the floor. Ethan was pretending not to notice as she carefully sprinkled cheese over a homemade pizza. "I added extra because Daddy always steals mine." "I do not." You do. I inspect it. You eat it. Vivian couldn't help smiling. Neither of them had noticed she was home. For a moment, she simply watched. There was something beautiful about ordinary moments. She had spent years chasing extraordinary success. Yet this felt far more valuable. Lily suddenly turned around. She's here. Before Vivian could put down her purse, Lily ran over and wrapped her arms around her waist. You're early. I wanted to be. Lily grinned. Good. Because family game night starts after dinner. Vivian blinked. It does. It does now. Ethan chuckled. I tried telling her we should ask you first. Lily shrugged. I already knew she'd say yes. Vivian laughed. You seem very confident. You're smiling more. Smiley people always say yes. Over dinner, they talked about everything except work. Lily proudly explained how she'd scored a goal at soccer practice. Ethan admitted he'd accidentally burned breakfast that morning because he'd been thinking about Vivian's board meeting. Vivian confessed she'd never actually played a board game in her life. Lily nearly dropped her slice of pizza. Never. Vivian shook her head. My grandfather taught me chess. That's not a board game. It literally is. It's a serious game. We're playing fun games. Ethan smiled. I think she's made the rules. Vivian raised her hands in surrender. I've already learned that arguing with her is impossible. Lily beamed. Daddy says I got that from him. I absolutely did not. You absolutely did. Their laughter filled the penthouse. For the first time since moving in, it finally sounded like a home. Weeks passed. The arranged marriage slowly stopped feeling arranged. Vivian began leaving work earlier. Not every day. But often enough that employees started noticing. Instead of eating lunch alone in her office, she began walking through the company cafeteria. She learned names. Remembered birthdays. Asked about families. When the overnight cleaning staff arrived, she stayed late one evening just to thank them personally. The next morning, the entire building was buzzing. No CEO had ever done that before. Meanwhile, Ethan never asked for an office at Ashford Global. He never accepted expensive gifts. He still opened his garage every morning at 7. One Saturday, Vivian arrived unannounced carrying 2 cups of coffee. The mechanics stopped working. You own this place now, one of them joked. Ethan smiled. No. I just work here. Vivian handed him the coffee. I thought maybe your favorite customer deserved a discount. He laughed. My favorite customer still owes me for her last oil change. She looked offended. You charged me. You insisted. I thought you'd forget. I remember unpaid invoices. The mechanics burst into laughter. One of them leaned toward another and whispered, she's different here. She was. At Ashford Global, Vivian was the brilliant CEO. Inside Ethan's garage, she was simply, Vivian. And she loved it. A month later, the Ashford Foundation hosted its annual charity gala. Business leaders from across the country attended. Vivian wore an elegant midnight blue gown. Ethan looked uncomfortable in a tuxedo. Lily, wearing a tiny silver dress, declared herself the important one. As they entered the ballroom together, hundreds of cameras flashed. A reporter called out, Mrs. Ashford. Vivian stopped. One question. She smiled. Go ahead. When you married Ethan Carter, critics said it would damage your image. The reporter glanced toward Ethan. Looking back. Do you have any regrets? The room became quiet. Vivian reached for Ethan's hand. She looked at him first. Then back at the cameras. My only regret. She smiled warmly. Is believing success meant never needing anyone. The room erupted in applause. She continued. I spent years building a company. My husband taught me how to build a family. Ethan looked down, embarrassed by the attention. Lily tugged on his sleeve. Daddy. What? I told you she'd become smiley. He laughed. You were right. I know. Later that evening, the foundation announced a surprise initiative. The Eleanor Carter Family Opportunity Fund. Named after Ethan's late wife. Vivian stepped to the microphone. This fund will provide childcare grants and job training for single parents who are trying to rebuild their lives. She looked toward Ethan. I've learned that some of the strongest people in the world quietly carry responsibilities most of us never see. So this is for them. The audience stood. Not because the donation was large. But because the reason behind it was genuine. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. After the ceremony, he found Vivian standing alone on the balcony. You didn't tell me. I wanted it to be a surprise. He shook his head slowly. No one has ever honored Eleanor like that. Vivian smiled gently. She helped shape the man I fell in love with. The words escaped before she could stop them. She froze. Ethan stared at her. You. She laughed nervously. I wasn't planning to say it like that. He stepped closer. I'm glad you did. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan quietly said, I've loved you for a while. Not because you're brilliant. Not because you're successful. I loved the woman who kept Lily's drawing in her desk. The woman who learned every employee's name. The woman who came home. Vivian felt tears slip down her cheeks. No boardroom victory had ever made her feel this seen. She whispered, I love you too. He gently kissed her, not because a contract required it. Not because anyone was watching. But because they had finally chosen each other. Years later, a framed child's drawing still hung in Vivian's office. Whenever visitors asked why such a simple picture occupied the place where expensive artwork could have hung, she always smiled. It reminds me, she would say, that the most valuable things in life are usually made with love, not money. Before we end today's story, if this touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and share it with someone who believes love can be found in the most unexpected places. Leave a comment telling us the biggest lesson you learned from Vivian and Ethan's journey, and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. Vivian once believed she had to choose between building an empire and building a family. Life taught her a far more beautiful truth. The greatest empire isn't the one the world applauds. It's the one waiting for you when you walk through your front door.